Good evening, everybody. Welcome along to the EFL Debate League One podcast. I'd like to introduce my regular guests, Jack Ward from the Jack Ward Football Podcast, and my co-host, Ed Walker, an expert on all things League One and Two. Kicking things off, I'm delighted to be joined by Jon Palmer from Gloucestershire Live and the Gloucestershire Echo, the Cheltenham Town reporter. Good evening to you, John. Thanks so much for your time. Another goalless game for Cheltenham Town last night in Darrell Clarke's first game in charge. I suppose the first place to go to would be Darrell Clarke and the impact he's made on the club. He's certainly not sugarcoated things so far, has he?
No, evening everyone. I think there was a big lift when Darrell Clarke was appointed, when it was announced. It was speculated about on Thursday, announced on Friday. His presence at the game on Saturday, everyone was quite excited about it. And I think now he will really know the size of the task that's facing him. After watching the Lincoln game and then being in charge for the Fleetwood game and actually being on the touchline on Tuesday night, I think he will realise what a job he's got. Huge task to turn it around. If he keeps Cheltenham up this season, it will be an incredible achievement. But he will get time. I don't think his job will depend on keeping Cheltenham up this season. As long as there's signs of progress. What they don't want, obviously, is to get worse, which is what happened to Forest Green last season when they got rid of Ian Birchnell.
Dare I ask, is it possible to get worse, John?
Exactly. So I'm sure he will make an impact. I think last night has to be the lowest moment. Derby at home on Saturday, so I suppose it could get worse. But I think in terms of performance and him realising how much work there is to do with this team to get them anywhere near having a chance of staying up, I think the Fleetwood game has to be the bottom point, and then hopefully get that stat out of the way of scoring a goal, and then maybe things could.
Do you think this needs two moments really to get this going? First of all, getting off the mark with an actual goal, and then picking up results, or is it an ideal world you get both together? Of course, the first win comes with that first goal, but is there a bit you think that confidence naturally comes if they just find the back of the net in one of these upcoming matches?
Yeah, I think it could make a huge difference. Just getting the ball in the net, even if it's a score draw or a narrow defeat with an encouraging performance. But last night was dismal, really. Can't blame. I think everyone at the club probably has to take a bit of blame for what's going on at the moment. But the one person who can't be blamed is Darrell Clarke, really, at the moment, because he's inherited what is a bit of a mess of a squad. 7 loan players, 29 players. Disappointing summer, really, recruitment-wise, is looking like now, but there were mitigating circumstances in that, with Mickey Moore's departure midway through probably the recruitment process. And I asked the chairman, David Bloxham, about that this week, and he admitted that they probably should have made a more decisive action when Mickey handed his notice in, said he was going to Shrewsbury. So I think mistakes have been made. Easy to say that with hindsight, but I think the board, the players, obviously Wade Elliott's got to take some of the blame, although I do have a lot of sympathy for him. And I still think he's a good coach. I just think a lot of things conspired against him, but obviously he's got to take some of the blame. But I think Darrell Clarke will be given time. And he got clapped off last night, but the rest of the players a lot of the ground were jeering them off and telling them they're not fit to wear the shirt. So it was quite an interesting contrast, but he's the one person who isn't going to get any stick for a while, because I think people understand what he's up against at the moment.
Certainly do. I want to come back to your point, John, about the recruitment in the summer, and I absolutely think there's a valid conversation to be had about whether Russ Milton was the right person to sort of replace Mickey Moore's job. But I also remember there was quite a prominent line of thinking that it actually wouldn't affect Cheltenham too much in that window, because at the time you had a block of 17 players. And I would say at the time as well, there seemed to be a reasonable amount of confidence in that block of 17 players, independent from who you brought in. So as much as some of the new players haven't delivered, are we also kind of rethinking our perspective on what the players who are already there from last season are capable of?
Yeah, I think, I don't think anyone saw this coming. I don't think anyone thought Cheltenham were going to breeze to another comfortable mid-table finish. But I don't think anyone thought it was going to be this bad, even with Alfie May leaving and key members of staff leaving during the summer. I don't think anyone even looking at the first few games of the season, would have thought Cheltenham would be 11 games, 1 point, no goals. So I don't think anyone saw that coming. Some of the players from last season look good on paper, and the ones that were tied down, some of them have been some of the better performers this season. For example, Lewis Freestone, I think, can hold his head high about his performances so far this season. He won't be happy, but he's certainly not disgraced himself. Luke Southwood the same. Everyone would have been pleased when he agreed to sign on a permanent deal because he did so well on loan. I think it's an obvious one, isn't it? But the Alfie May departure seems to have had a huge impact on Aidan Keener as well. So that's not only taken away your best player and top goal scorer, but it's also seems to have reduced the effectiveness of your record signing, who formed a good, really, really good partnership with May last season during the second half of last season. And then we've chatted about it before, Gab, the loans. Some obviously you can't write them off yet. It's still early days. Some of them have hardly played, but to have 7 loans and 4, they're all fit now, and only 4 of them were picked in the 18 last night. I think that's a big contrast. When Mickey Moore's at the club, you'd always have a couple of really influential loans on the pitch every week. We can think of some good examples, Callum Wright, Caleb Taylor, Finn Azaz. There was numerous ones, and Luke Southwood, of course. So I think the loans have been a disappointment so far.
I think I appreciate that in terms of looking at the output from the loans, I think you're absolutely correct, John. But I would also sort of offer some defence for the club from the point of view of, you look at the reputation for some of these loans. D'Auria Henry, I think I'm right in saying he was Italy under-20s pedigree or Italy youth pedigree, something along those lines. Ollie Hammond came with brilliant reviews at Nottingham Forest as a midfielder. Cameron Popion, we were talking about, there's people from Brighton who were saying they're hoping he was going to get a bigger move than Cheltenham because they thought he was actually better than that, and he's not started the game yet. So do you think that there's something wrong structurally that's actually leading to these, and are these young players coming into the right environment?
Yeah, I think the environment's definitely part of it. Culture shock for them coming into a team that are really not functioning at the level, and but I don't think there's ever been a loan signing from a top level club that hasn't come with a bit of excitement, because if they're at a Premier League club, they've obviously got some ability. But you look at previous examples. Joe Rodon came on loan to Cheltenham, struggled a little bit. Next thing you know, he's getting a move from Swansea to Tottenham and playing regularly in the Premier League. Aaron Ramsey came on loan to Cheltenham and didn't start that many games. Certainly wouldn't have, he was obviously a talent, but he didn't make a huge impact during that first season in League One. And look at him now, with the career he's got ahead of him.
Elijah Adebayo, he didn't actually start that many games.
Sorry?
Elijah Adebayo didn't start that many games in the
season. Adebayo, sometimes I think players can come out on loan to the wrong club or too early and still make a great career, but some of the ones at the moment might fall into that bracket. They're just not quite the right fit for Cheltenham at the moment. But they're the likes of Hammond and Pupion and Malcolm, who's probably one of the better ones in recent performances, could still go on to have great careers. So I don't want to write any of them off, but I don't think they're going to keep Cheltenham in League One this season.
Yeah, I think again it comes to a difficult situation for January prospectively, even if Cheltenham are in with a chance. Jack, what do you make of Cheltenham's situation? Do you still think you're looking at 49 points that Cheltenham are going to need now if they want to get to the 50 mark? It's looking like the points tally for survival is going to have to be lower than 50 for the Robins to have some sort of chance, because at the moment, 49
which I do think it will be, by the way. I'd be prepared to say that.
You think it will be what, sorry?
Yeah, I don't feel like 50 is the number needed nowadays. My anticipation still high 40s, certainly not much lower.
I would challenge that slightly, Ed, because I think when you had Fleetwood staying up with 40 points 2 seasons ago, that was when it was a split league where you pretty much knew that anytime you had so many big clubs in the league that you had Ipswich finishing 11th and ridiculous things like that. So there was a massive disparity. I don't think there's a massive disparity anymore. I think lots of teams will take points off one another. So I think it probably will be quite close to 50. It might not be 50 exactly.
Potentially.
But I think it'll be a lot higher than maybe what it was a couple of years ago. Jack, what do you think about Cheltenham's chances?
They've got a massive challenge ahead of them. I think the big concern for me last night was speak about a manager bounce. There didn't look like any sign of bounce whatsoever. And when you bring a new manager in with the excitement and of course you can't blame the manager for that, but there naturally is normally a bounce from the players. The players have got to impress a manager that also is coming in with a real level of excitement as well. So they've got something to prove. They know the fan, and again, the players aren't stupid. They'll know the fans are excited about this appointment, and now they'll know this is quite an ambitious appointment, especially considering Cheltenham's position right now. And they looked completely lackluster. I mean, going forward, they looked completely below par. They didn't look like a side that are going to improve anytime soon. And that sounds harsh and reactionary, but we can look at the evidence that we've got. I'd also say that's no reaction against the side in Fleetwood, who a couple of weeks ago we'd be talking about 100% contenders with Cheltenham. Now Fleetwood have turned it around in the last couple of weeks, but we're talking about two football clubs that a few weeks ago were definitely going to be in that conversation, and Cheltenham still are, and Fleetwood have done well since Johnson's come in and I'd say turned it around, but they've definitely improved. So I just worry that there was no sign. It wasn't even the first 10 minutes or the last 10 minutes or a spell in that second half where they sort of really kicked into gear and the players sort of realised this is a really difficult situation, and we've got a new manager that we should be impressing, and we should be, trying to prove that we're not a side that haven't actually scored a goal and are utterly useless and at the bottom of the table. But unfortunately, that is what we saw. We saw a side that looked completely below the level that it should take to be a League One football club. And after 10 games, that side needs open heart surgery, and we're starting October. And that's never a good place to be. And that again, it's not just the performances on the pitch since the start of the season. We're speaking about a very, very tedious window for lots of other circumstances, but it's clearly significant when you don't have a very good transfer window, or again, when reflecting on it now, the football started, that window was not good enough, and it didn't bring in the quality that it needs to, again, give them right now a fighting chance to stay in this league.
Yeah. John, I suppose you mentioned earlier that Darrell Clarke won't be judged. His future at Cheltenham Town won't depend on this season. I'm just wondering, how do you balance the perspective that it's still very early in the season? It's early October. There's 35 games to play, 105 points still to play for, with I suppose the fact that it is looking like such a tall order already. How do you sort of balance those two perspectives as a Cheltenham fan and journalist at the moment?
I reckon Darrell would have discussed this with the board when he was, being interviewed or considering whether he wanted the job even. What were your expectations with the current squad, with the current budget, with the start to the season that you've had? Do you expect me to keep the team up? Does my job depend on, does me keeping my job depend on Cheltenham Town surviving this season? And I don't think the board would. I think the board want to see progress, and they won't want to see Cheltenham go down without a fight. But it's a relegation team at the moment, no doubt about it. And I agree with everything Jack just said, really. But I don't think Fleetwood were absolutely brilliant last night. But they're much better than Cheltenham. I don't think Fleetwood will go down, actually. I think
they weren't, and they also didn't have to be. It's important to say.
They cruised through it, really. But I think their squad is good enough to get out of trouble. But they, like you said, they were the team at the start of the game that won place above Cheltenham, and they were so much better than Cheltenham all over the pitch, really. So that tells its own story. So I think balancing wise, I think try and at least stay in touch until January, when there's obviously bound to be quite a few ins and outs. Keith Downing pulled off an amazing escape act in 07-08 when Cheltenham looked done, when John Ward left to go to Carlisle. Everyone thought they were going to go down. He brought in 3 really good loan players from Bristol City in January, or in the new year, Richard Keogh, Alex Russell, Steve Brooker, and they stayed up on the last day. It was a brilliant achievement. Then they went down the following year. So it is tough for Cheltenham in League One, as you know. The budget's maybe 17th, 18th in League Two. It would be if they're in League Two. That's what Darrell Clarke's up against. Money has been wasted, and probably in January it's going to have to be distributed a lot more cleverly and with a smaller squad but higher quality, hopefully. But it's not easy to sign players when you're cut adrift. Well, it looks like you're going to be cut adrift at the bottom, already 7 points from safety, and that's testament to the work done in previous years. Cheltenham haven't really been in the bottom 4 at all under Michael Duff 2 seasons ago, and Wade Elliott last year. They were virtually kept their head above water for the whole season, apart from maybe 1 week early last season when they had a tough start. But that's a great achievement. Everyone was hoping they might be able to stay in for a 4th season, which they've never done before, 4 in a row. But to be brutally honest, it would take a miracle to be playing League One football next year.
With that in mind, then, John, I do want to bring in Colin Yates from the Fan Zone podcast shortly, but I've just got one more question about the contract situation for 2024. Are there a lot of players out of contracts? Do you think Darrell Clarke, if the worst does happen, is going to have the scope to revamp the squad?
Yeah, I think if he had the choice, he would have a massive clear out now. He's obviously got to now work out which players are going to feature in his plans and which aren't, because there are some that should be capable of doing a good job in League One in a relegation battle. But I think he will. Yeah, there are quite a lot of players out of contract in the summer. A lot of players, and I think it will be. It felt like the end of an era because Mickey Moore, Michael Duff era passed on to Wade Elliott, working under Mickey Moore. It felt like a continuation, really. Very much the same formation, same recruitment style, same recruitment analyst, same director of football. I think now Darrell Clarke will bring his own assistant manager in. There's a decision that needs to be made by the club about whether they want another director of football or not.
Oh, surely, John. I think that's absolutely paramount.
They asked David Bloxham about that this week, and he said they're going to certainly let Darrell assess everything and who's doing what, and then that could happen. So there'll be a few more changes. Feel like a change of direction. I think a lot of players are going to be moving on. There are some good players in the squads. There are players that I think can still go on to have really good careers, possibly 3 or 4 that could play higher. But there's also some that are probably their time at Cheltenham might be coming towards an end. Others that just need to somehow rediscover some confidence because they're much better than they look at. They're much better players than they're showing at the moment. Aidan Keena is one of the classic example. We know that he can do it from what he did second half of last season, but this season he's been miles off it, sadly. So that's another challenge for Darrell Clarke. Get Keena firing again, and might have half a chance.
Yeah, I'd like to see Papillon come in, to be honest, because I think it's surely time for him to get a go. Given
did all right when he came on last night, Gab.
Yeah, well, it's happened a couple of times now, hasn't it? So surely, I think that's it. You've got to give him a start, really, from my point of view. Listen, John, it's been great to have you on, and hopefully it's a miracle for Cheltenham Town, but it's looking like a bit of a stretch at the moment. But it's been great to discuss it with you. And
I don't know who it is who does the song "I Believe in Miracles," but that just needs to be in the changing room every single week at this moment. I can't remember who the artist is, but just have that as the walkout song every single week, John. That probably did it.
You never know, dear. You never know. But
you never know.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Right. Yeah,
nice
thanks very much, John.
Thanks a lot.
Great to have you on. So my next guest is Colin Yates from the Fan Zone podcast of Bolton Wanderers. How are you, Col?
Yeah, very well, actually. Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, last night I picked up another vital 3 points. Feeling pretty privileged here, actually. I'm in EFL podcast royalty kind of situation going here. So
yeah,
thank you.
Well, you're very much part of it, Cole. Donning the shirt as well. Great.
Well, yeah, I've got old school tonight. Yeah, we've got.
I love it. 03 and 4 is that?
I do like a shirt with a central badge. More shirts than them. They do well.
Yeah, I think this is 2002-3. You weren't far off, Gab.
Oh, nice. Okay. Finished, just avoided relegation. Stayed at 17th, I think, that season, weren't you? Something like that. Thank you. So in terms of Bolton Wanderers' chances of automatic promotion this season, massively boosted by that 3-2 victory over Stevenage. Talk to us about how you're feeling as a Wanderer right now.
Confident as we should be. I think obviously we've got a squad that should represent that. Obviously we're forever being told that it's got a lot of flexibility and good amount of depth for the level. And I'm inclined to agree with that. I think it has. A little bit concerned in inverted commas around the performances of late. Not our fluid self. However, still picking up results. So that is definitely, I know it's a bit of a, old football cliche, but it's definitely a positive that. Last night was exactly that. Got to give credit to Stevenage. I think they'll have a good season. I'll be very surprised if they don't. Play very Steve Evans football is probably the politest and nicest way of putting it, but it's effective. It works. They know it. They can play a little bit as well, which is nice to see. They came to our stadium and tried to have a go, which is always, credit where credit's due when teams do that. And Port Vale again on Saturday. We got over the line with them. We've had 2 results in recent days that are really kind of like make us think, you know what. We're going to have a good season here because we're doing it with a lot of injuries at the moment, guys. to key players as well, and still picking up results. So yeah, quietly confident, and I think we should be, really, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. What's your take on the Morley and Sheehan in midfield conversation? Because that's sort of seems to be a topic of debate among Trotters fans right now. There's a school of thought that in bigger games you can't afford them both. And from an outside, humble outsider's point of view, I'd probably go the other way and say, that the rewards outweigh the risk, because they're both such creative players that can be so fun to have simultaneously. What's your take on that?
I think it's Aaron Morley's not started at the best starts to the season, so obviously that's important to realise that. We all know his abilities, set pieces in game. Obviously, he can affect play, he can dictate play. But he's not had the best starts, for whatever reason that is. Bit of a mystery, bit inconsistent. Whereas Josh Sheehan, on the other hand, he started fantastically well. He's got back into the Wales squad. He's got back in again today. He's scored last night. He assisted last night. He's influencing games. So he's a no-brainer. He starts. Them together, I think you're right. Yeah, it's, some games they can work very well together, but obviously both of them need to be, in form. Paris Magoma's due back. We saw glimpses of him that he could fit quite seamlessly into our midfield. Obviously, Carl Dempsey, kind of guess what he says. What he says in the tin with him. He's a proven player at this level. So again, we've got options, but for them to play together at this moment in time, Gab, I'm not so sure because of Aaron's inconsistencies the start.
It's a bit of a surprise, isn't it? Because he was one of your best players. Excuse me.
I think he still is, Gab. He still is. He still is one of our best players, and probably one of our players that are of the highest market value. And I'm sure whoever it is that you speak to will probably say the same thing, really. But yeah, sometimes players start off slow, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Ed, what do you make of Bolton's start to the season? Because the first 3 games, they were absolutely on fire, scored 3 goals in each of them, and there was part of you thinking, are they going to run away with the league? Since then, they had a few, lost 4-0 to Wigan, dropped points. I think they drew 1-1 at your place. Where do you assess?
There's a feed to Reading in there as well. I think a little kind of a period of real strength and then a period of shakiness and then go back the other way again. I still feel quite good about them. What I'm quite pleased is that it does feel like there's a share around the goals now. So I think we had quite this high dependence on Dion Charles last year as that main goal. He is still now, but Adewale is contributing. You're getting goals from the back line, noticed yesterday. And I'm quite pleased with how this team seems to be adapting to those defensive problems they've got. That's not the natural back line they're lining up at the minute without Ricardo Santos in the middle.
Correct.
And it's working all right with Johan Toll in the centre at the minute, Cole.
He's fantastic, Ed. He really is. He's got a, not to get carried away, but he's got a bit of a Gary Cahill, Gudney Bergson vibe going on, which obviously not necessarily for Jack, certainly from his age in terms of Gudney Bergson, but I'm sure he remembers Gary Cahill. He's got a very, very much, he's able to play it from the back. He's comfortable carrying the ball out from the back. He's very versatile as well. He can play for left, right, centre. So yeah, exactly right.
And is there quite surprised that George Thomason's been as involved in this team as he has been in recent games? Because there's quite a lot of all 90s recently, I've noticed.
He has up until his recent suspension for his 5th yellow card in, I think, 7 games or 8 games. And he got another one last night as well. So that's 6th for the season, which is a slight concern.
Is that the role he plays though in the team?
I think so, yeah. A bit naivety as well, Ed. I think he sometimes can be a bit rash in challenges and a bit niggly from time to time. So obviously, then he starts to get a reputation as well, doesn't it, really, from getting a lot of yellow cards. So combination of that. But Rico Santos has been a big miss. Naturally, of course, he is. But we've got so much.
When is he back, Carl? Actually,
imminently.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, okay. I don't think he'll be ready for this weekend against Carlisle. I think we play Carlisle on Saturday. But certainly after the international break, he'll be fit and firing. And he's back on the grass, as Ian Evatt likes to say.
Oh, that's great. That's great news. That's a huge boost. I watched him on the opening day against Lincoln City, and he was absolutely phenomenal.
So if we take him back in, if we say we've got Forrester and Toole in there, is it Ardell then who probably comes out of that left centre-back role?
Correct.
With Toole coming that left side, you'd say?
Yeah, so I think what will happen is, you're absolutely spot on, but what I think will happen when Rico's back, obviously he's one of the first names on the team sheet, he'll go centre. And then Forrester will keep his position. Currently, Gethin Jones has had a poor start to the season, but he's suspended after a terrible red card a couple of weeks back. I can't see him getting back in on the right side of the 5 or the 3, depending on how you look at it. And what will happen to Toll, because he's so versatile, he'll just slide into the left-hand side of the 3 and quite.
So he's played all 3 positions there now in Toil.
He goes to him, slot him in. It's like
his versatility. But I've got to give credit where it's due. Forrester's been phenomenal. For those who know a bit about him from his time at Port Vale, I got to admit I didn't know a great deal about the lad, but I'm
kind of impressed. I had a bit of an eye opener when I saw that, because I didn't think that much of him at Port Vale. I thought there was a bright player in there at Port Vale, but it didn't seem to me like it was an imminent that he was going to move up from what I would probably consider the middle of the division right up to the top end of it. So I've been really impressed with how he's handled this so far.
Yeah, and I'll be very surprised if he can't take them performances further this season, given his impact in the last few games, especially.
For sure. Jack, do you see Bolton finishing in the top 2?
I've been really impressed by Bolton in recent weeks. I want to actually ask
that one.
It's really tough to predict. I think there's a lot of teams that are going for it at the moment. I'm pleased to say we are in the hat, which we didn't expect to be.
When did Bolton play Portsmouth, Cole?
Ooh, good question.
Because that's a mouth-watering one at the minute.
I should know that, shouldn't I, guys? Sorry. I think it's quite soon. I did have the fixtures up in front of me actually before. Keep talking, Jack, and I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I'll feel for you. Don't worry. No, I have been really, really impressed by them, and I'll ask a question to Cole in a minute when he's looked at the fixtures. But I think I've noticed there's been a bit of a change the way that Ian Everts, well, whether he's intended to play like that, but you said at the start, a little bit not patchy, but we've sort of seen in recent years last season in particular, and the successful season in League Two, where it's been utter domination and utter control. I think in the last couple of games, you've had to grind results out. They've been a little bit more ugly, a little bit tougher and a bit rough around the edges, but you found a way to win. And that's something that last season we spoke a lot about with Bolton. They were, I think, attractive for a large belt of games, but we always used to walk away and go and reflect on games and analyse them and go, but they drew that game 1-1, or they drew that game and they should have scored probably 3 or 4 more. I think we've seen in the last couple of weeks, you've had spells where they've been, I guess, less dominant spells, but you've made sure you've been converting when you've had those moments in games. And, fine margins and moments in games are something that we always speak about, and they're football cliches, but they are also really important. You've been much better at finding the back of the net when you've been on top. And I think in recent years, you've been maybe more dominant for almost 85 minutes. You've hardly let an opposition have a kick of a game. You've been very, very intricate. You've been, again, very, very patient with the ball in possession, but sometimes you've lacked that output. I think you've maybe sacrificed that slightly and swayed towards being not reactionary to the opposition, but you sort of let the opposition maybe have a little bit of control, but then regroup to make sure that when you have your next moment, you're clinical in the final third. I don't have the pleasure of watching Bolton every single week, but from analysing games and looking at them, I've noticed there is a shift in the way that Bolton in Everton is sort of setting up and approaching matches.
Yeah, there may very well be a bit of a shift. I think in recent games, I think the injuries have played a bit of an impact on that, because what's happening is, I think the idea is to kind of go off the juggler a little bit early doors, get ahead, try and sit in a little bit, because we haven't got the legs in terms of the impacts off the bench, because we had Luke Matheson, obviously, we signed in the summer, who's coming through the B team, and we've had a couple of other B team lads on the bench. So there's obviously the legs have deteriorated as the game's gone on, so we've sat in a little bit, sat a bit deeper. So yeah, a bit of both really, Jack, to kind of answer your question.
Yeah, and I would say as well, on top of that, there's been games actually where you probably should have been killing games off as well.
Absolutely. The Reading game.
Reading was the one before last. I completely forgotten who you played, but it was a bit of Reading deja vu, wasn't it? And you sort of made sure that you didn't go through that experience of going 1-0 up, but then being really lackluster and letting Reading take the chances in the second half. And again, you killed that game off earlier. That situation doesn't happen. I think yesterday it was a little bit different. You went from sort of struggling to score more than 1 to scoring 3 in a bit of a thriller against Stevenage, but you needed to, because like you say, Stevenage sort of had that resilience and character to go to Bolton almost with a fearless mentality of, we're going to give. I think they probably they smelt blood a little bit. I think they probably thought, if we get 2 goals here, recent weeks suggest that Bolton might struggle to match us with the amount of goals. And to be fair to Bolton, they did, and to be able to Bolton, you responded perfectly and you scored 3.
Yeah.
So in the end, you reflect really positively about it.
Stevenage confident as well, aren't they, Jack? So obviously, they're going to go there with their tails up a little bit. Big stadium, 20,000 people there, whatever they're on last night, and think, what, why not? Let's go for it, type of thing.
And Steve Evans is their manager as well. And Steve Evans will always, he's a manager that will get players up for games, no matter who you're playing and where you're playing.
Oh, yeah.
And he's been on the touchline at our stadium in the Championship before, so we all know what he's about. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, dark arts to the top level.
Absolutely that, yeah. Portsmouth on December the 9th, gents.
And Oxford is 2 weeks before.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. That's going to be good stuff, isn't it?
When do we go to the stadium with 3 stands again? What date's that?
That's
not long, mate. Not long. We'll be standing on our cars as we
You're
speak.
not playing Mansfield this year. What are you on about?
And Carl, I've got a couple of guests I want to bring in shortly, but I do want to ask you one more question, which is, are you more confident that Bolton are going to win automatic promotion than you were before the start of the season? Are you about the same?
I'm very confident, Gab. Yeah, and I think the reason for that is we're getting by with a stretch squad at the moment, picking up results. I think the squad that we've got at the moment is very, very capable as it stands, and probably would be for the remainder of the season. But I think what will happen is if we're within that top 2, top 3 talk come January, which I think we will be, they'll invest and we'll go for it. And I think we'll look to attract and bring in players who might be playing in the Championship at the moment, who are obviously looking for that next move and looking to kind of look on a bit of a project. And they probably aim to bring them type of players in to kind of solidify us in that top 2. So I'm pretty confident, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all the best luck, Cole, and hopefully catch up with you later in the season, mate.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Cheers, Cole.
Yeah, mate.
Delighted to introduce my next guest, which is Knappers from Cod's Vlogs. How are you, Ben?
He did tell me he was coming on this as well. He didn't even tell me he was coming on.
Well, what can I say, Wardy? Hello, mate. Surprise. Good to see you, mate. Hello, Gab. Thank you for having me on, mate.
Yeah, good to have you on. I think for Fleetwood at the start of the season, 1 point from the first 5, I think it was under Scott Brown, and a lot of question marks over the fitness of the team initially. Are you surprised how quickly Lee Johnson has been able to get results out of this side?
No, actually, because you look at the squad, it isn't a bad squad at all. Stockley, Vela, you look at that Marriott goal scorer, Lynch again, although he's not one of the better players on paper, one player of the year last year. Rooney obviously injured. Josh Hill is one of the better players in his position at times in the division, and we brought a couple of players in. Like Danny Mayers. So it just kind of needed to click again. And Fleetwood were in a couple of games. It was just a mistake at Charlton, giving a penalty away, a mistake at Shrewsbury. Player slips on halfway, they score. A minute later, we have a sending off. Doesn't happen if the sending off doesn't happen if if the play doesn't slip for us. Cambridge, they were the better side, fair play, and Bolton, they were absolutely unbelievable for 25, 30 minutes, and Fleetwood had chances. So I'm surprised we've won the last 2 games. I am, but I'm happy overall so far. I'm a little bit surprised, but not too surprised that we've bounced back this quickly, because players are smiling again, and it kind of feels like the pressure's off now.
So the fans as well. I think the fans are smiling again.
Yeah.
You are, Knappers, anyway. You are.
Yeah, I couldn't have been any worse, could I, Jack? No, it was a bleak time, and you come away from games thinking, how is he getting this bad? And the Oxford game was probably the worst one. Lee Johnson's first game in charge, and you kind of think, new bounce, we lose 3-0, but you look at it, we were all right in the game. Just Oxford were better than us. The midfield 3 of Oxford were unbelievable. And you say the first, 5-6 games, Gab. In our first kind of run in the first season, we played Charlton away, we played Bolton away, we played Derby away, played Oxford at home. We've had a couple of winnable games in Shrewsbury, Carlisle, and then we played. There's another one. There's another one in there. There's escaping me a minute.
I appreciate that point in terms of the fixture list, but I don't know whether this borne out for you on the pitch, Knappers. But I do have some anecdotal evidence to suggest that there was issues with the fitness regime under Scott Brown, which
100%.
which was a contributing factor behind the slow start. And I guess from my point of view, I'm a little bit surprised that you've been able to get those back-to-back wins to get you up and running so quickly, when I thought you'd almost be having a pre-season in season almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of think, well, the fitness issues go a lot deeper than Scott Brown. And I kind of think, well, why aren't they fit? Like, why are we picking up so many injuries? Because it's not just, a Fleetwood thing this season. Is it the pitches at Pilford? Is it the pitches at Highbury? You're starting to look deeper, because a couple of years ago, Gab, remember when Fleetwood just about stayed up on goal difference? They had 16 injuries at one point. Last season, there was a large portion of the season players out injured, and it's like, well, these are different managers, these are different things, these are different seasons. It's the same happening at the same football club. So I do think kind of the deeper runs, much leaner. But I think kind of you've seen already the midfield three yesterday were unbelievable in the amount they run, the pressing. Vela's playing higher up as well, which I think is huge for us.
Do you think it utilises his energy a bit more in a sort of more of a pressing role?
Yeah, absolutely. And the gaffer said that at the weekend. He said how, we got closer to Leyton Orient, and, how we could press in pack and could go together. And, some of the players are still not looking quite as fit as others. But, Josh Vela is, as a footballer, is the ultimate pro in terms of fitness and, in terms of running. At the start of pre-season, it was him, Rooney and Jay Lynch. When Jay Lynch is your third fittest player at the football club and he's a goalkeeper, yeah, he's a fit footballer and a fit athlete, fair play to him. But your goalkeeper being third in the fitness tests, worrying.
Yeah, certainly is. I guess I really want to talk to you about Junior Quirtner, Ben, because he was kind of on the periphery of my sphere of consciousness. Last season came off the bench a bit, but I don't think he started loads. And then I had a tweet, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the person who tweeted me. So, but he was saying that this is one of the most exciting talents in the EFL. Listen, I'd want to watch them.
I wouldn't say one of the most exciting yet, because I kind of think, well, he's played 15 games, and you kind of think, well, I need to see a little bit more from him, because we've seen this before. But in the last 3 games he's been excellent. He's got a goal and got 2 goals and an assist. He took his goal very well at Burton, and the closing down wasn't brilliant, and he put one into the top corner. And again, yesterday, a brilliant free kick. Got a great assist the other day, and you can't fault that. But kind of think, take one game as it comes, and you can keep improving. You've seen, obviously Jack's looking like Tyler Goodwin at Oxford. He's carrying on getting better, isn't he? And that's what Junior now needs to do. So he is looking bright. He's looking, energetic. But kind of, if you ask me again, in 15, 20 games, he's done well for over a 3-game period. We now need to see that over a constant base over 46 games, because it is hard Saturday, Tuesday now, because we're coming into a really busy period, aren't we?
Ben, is there a lot to say about the impact that Ben Hanahan's had in the middle of that back three? And then also I hear there's quite a lot said about Bossum Laval, who's been playing on the right of the back three as well, I believe.
Yes, Ed. I think Ben Hennigan, since he's come in, has been our best player. I think, obviously, at Burton, obviously, you'll know, I thought, bar giving the penalty away, he was the best player on the park, in my opinion. He won absolutely everything in the air. And, I was looking through free agents just about a week before, and I thought, he won't come to us. I was so surprised we got him, and we needed a centre-half. We just needed someone.
It kind of felt like his time at Sheffield Wednesday was just knocked back, really, by people around him. I think the fitness issue's the same, but he was supposedly with a team fighting to the championship.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
a great aerial defender at this level, isn't he? You know what you're going to get from him, don't you? Ben, listen, I know you've got to prepare for your own show late coming shortly, so we'll let you get on with that. But thanks for joining us, and great to see the Cods making some progress, mate.
Cheers, Gab. Thank you very much, mate. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, fella. Delighted to introduce our next guest, which is Jack Hancock from the excellent Hancock Analysis. Jack, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on. Love your insight on X, as it's called now, to be particularly modern. You must be really happy as a Portsmouth fan right now.
Yeah, I'm feeling... So I've been speaking all day. My voice is shot to bits.
I thought it'd be the shouting from last night.
No, it was that. And then I had a meeting early in the morning. I was chatting all day. I'm feeling so smug. It's great. especially because you big up the players so much over the summer. You think, I'm so screwed if we turn out rubbish. Obviously, it's a long season, but no, just really happy so far.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think's been key to Portsmouth being League One leaders?
Resilience and character. I think the talent speaks for itself, but I think I was chatting to someone on Twitter, or X as we should say, and there's like a weird Venn diagram for Portsmouth. You've got talent, resilience, and grit, and we've never had all three. And now when
Would
you
you say
combine
resilience and grit are kind of in the same?
Okay, what I guess maybe more robustness in terms of, if you look at the Danny Cowley squad, you had a lot of fighters there, but as soon as the chips went against them, that's not saying, is it? As soon as things went against them, it kind of turned.
Well, then they're not really fighters, aren't they? If things turn as soon as they went against them.
Don't we're in the Venn diagram, Gab. Okay. We had scrappy players, and now we've got scrappy players that are good at football and have bottle.
Okay.
We've got that, and yeah,
Right.
I guess just mentality and character. You can't tell this squad they're going to lose a game because we just come back every single time.
Yeah, no, that is brilliant. And do you know what impresses me as well, Jack, is a big part of the recruitment policy in the summer seemed to be signing a couple of youth prospects, but I would say mainly players in the early to mid-20s bracket who maybe hadn't had their career trajectory turn out exactly as they'd expected due to injuries, bad cultural or stylistic fit, or maybe things like that maybe went against them, and Portsmouth felt like they could correct that. But I still think that it's a bit of a risk to go with that model because you wonder if you are going to get that right balance of sort of leadership. But I guess you've got players in there like Regan Poole, for example, who you see the post-match scenes of the game at Barnsley, and he was like, minimum. You know what I mean?
I think went for a run. I was so motivated.
Yeah, you want to have that in your headphones, don't you? When you're in the gym having a sesh, it's like you set the standard now. I love it. But you've got that synergy in place, which I think is a really exciting thing. And I guess you've got to credit as well the leadership of John Mazzino.
Yeah, and I think just on the recruitment, we're only 11 games in, 10 games in.
Sure.
It's a long season, and we've seen this with Portsmouth. I think me and Ed joked we're either going to finish first or eighth, and
no in between.
Yeah, we could still very much finish eighth, and I would be shocked at all. And yeah, John's brilliant. I think if you take away the cup losses, our only 3 losses under him were Peterborough away, finishing the playoffs, Plymouth away, won the league, and Barnsley away, playoff finalists. 22 unbeaten, although a lot of them were draws, and it was largely turgid from kind of Easter onwards last year. I don't know, we're just so hard to beat, and the mentality of this squad is just at another level. And yeah, we could fall apart, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. But for now, I'm extremely happy.
Ed, I suppose the danger of Portsmouth falling apart, whether it's partly sort of trust issues, I guess, because Portsmouth haven't been able to get over the line over the last 6 years, but also, Ed, I guess you've got a manager in John Mazzino who's come such a long way so quickly, and I guess I think Portsmouth get top 2. That's my opinion, but I guess because he doesn't have that history of having done it before, there's always that question mark, I suppose, when it gets to those sort of crunch moments of the season. That's going to be the real test for him.
I think that's kind of that classic cliche feeling about Portsmouth at the minute, isn't it? Where when this unbeaten run comes to an end in the league, and it will, because nothing lasts forever, does it kind of just fall off from there? Like, what's the reaction to it that follows from that, perhaps? But I'm just so impressed with him at the minute. I feel like I've been incredibly impressed with his own tactical decisions, his choice of substitutions. That fight that Jack's talked about is so good. And Regan Poole really proved to be such a pivotal signing brought into Lincoln. I'm impressed with how Shaughnessy's really established himself in that back line, because I always liked him a lot at Burton. Thought he was a very strong, commanding defensive presence. Tried out in midfield a lot more by Dino Marmer and Jason Hasselbank, which was not really his natural position. Going in the back line has been a much better suit to him. And Alex Robertson. I love this guy. I don't know how this is a Manchester City loanee, if I remember right, Jack.
Yeah.
He's just suddenly emerged from everywhere, and he has looked absolutely superb. And I think is there a bit of a debate about Jack Sparks and his positioning, because he's rotated his time between kind of left back and left wing at the moment, hasn't he? I don't know which one feels the better fit at the minute.
Somewhere in the middle, i.e. left wing back. I was I like Jack for his offensive qualities, and it's still so early in his Pompey career, but I still have worries about him in a back four, unless you kind of put in the right parameters around him. So, for example, Gavin White at left wing, because he's so good defensively, or has been this season. Or, you have a ball-winning midfielder on that left who can fill in. But if you're talking about upside, his crossing is just unbelievable. And yeah, you touched on Alex Robertson. What a player. As soon as I first started researching him for the article, I was just blown away and I went, this kid has just got it. Some players, pardon me, getting emotional. Some players, you watch them and you go, you just got it. And that's Alex Robertson. I can't praise him enough. I mean, I wish he'd stop picking up the stupid little yellow cards because he's now suspended for Saturday. But
you got another Joe Morel now. Is that what we got? Two in midfield now that just rack up the cards together.
You can't have too many Joe Morels.
Jack Ward, what do you think of Portsmouth?
Not this again, Jack.
It sounds weird calling you Jack Ward. What do you think, Jack Ward?
No, I thought at school again. No, actually, I say that. I don't think anyone's ever. I don't think any
nickname would go Wardy instead, if we're going to go that way.
Yeah,
Wardy. Yeah, Wardy.
That tends to be the.
Don't call me cocky. That's where I draw the line.
Oh, I was just thinking that. Just had the idea.
I've been really impressed by Portsmouth. Again, we're in a little bit of a head-to-head with them at the top at the moment, which is getting quite exciting. And I'm sort of surrounding myself with lots of people that also support Portsmouth. So the conversation and it's not. It's a lot of. I still want Pompey to do well, even though all my friends basically at the moment in this industry support Portsmouth, which is really exciting. But they've been incredible. I think their mentality in recent weeks is just sort of, I guess they're just a cut above at that sort of level. We speak about late goals and speak about finding ways to win, and it's a cliche in football. The best teams find a way to win. The best teams turn draws into wins. And I think in previous years, maybe Pompey have sort of lacked that final edge, that little bit at the end to ensure you win a game of football. But last night is another example where you go 1-0 down. I think it's now 14 points from losing positions, which is an absolutely outrageous statistic considering we're sort of 10 games into a season. That's nearly every game you've won. You've gone 1-0 down in, or you trailed in. So again, that's what, your mentality monsters. You are right now just at times grinding through games, but even doing that with control as well, which is a sort of a strange balance. I think you haven't maybe been dominating every game, but with loads and loads of output, but you've been dominating it and controlling games of football. Against Wigan, I thought you've been better in other games with creative output, but you still had total control of the game. At no point did you think this is a really strong Wigan spell. Again, last night, you deserved to win that game of football. Wickham had a game plan. They went there to frustrate you. They went there to try and stop the rrhythm. Although I think Bloomfield has changed the philosophy and stylistic elements to Wickham's play. I think a lot of teams will go to Fratton Park and go to and play it home and away because you've proven your away record's just as good. You're going to play Pompey and try and disrupt that rhythm and complete and utter control that Mousinho wants his Pompey side to have. And if you can disrupt that, that's the only chance you've got of trying to beat Pompey right now. And again, you're invincible, you're unbeaten. So it's proven that teams are really struggling to find a way of stopping you when you get in your groove. And again, when you're sort of scoring goals in the 8th minute of injury time, then there's something special, isn't there? That this team means business.
Yeah, I was chatting to the guy behind me at Fratton Park yesterday. I said, the football is not great. It's not great, and that's fine. But we're in total control of games. It's good to watch, but it's not like Ipswich last year, where just scintillating to watch. We're really controlled. We play boring at times. That's how we kill games. But yeah, we never look panicked or like we're out of our depth. And I mean, if you want a blueprint for playing against us, I think Exeter. I big up Exeter a lot, mainly because one of my best mates is an Exeter fan. But I think Exeter had a really good game plan when it came to Fratton Park. It didn't quite work because they didn't have a really clinical number 9. But I think teams that can sit back and then hit you really fast in transition. I think that's how you play against us because the spaces can be quite wide at times.
How does that work then, Jack? That you've not been playing great football, scintillating football, as you've described, and sometimes I think you've used the word dull, and yet you're also quite open defensively, and yet on the other side of that, you've also been really effective and been able to control games. It's sort of odd.
It's a weird combination, yeah. And I kind of struggle to describe it sometimes because
Sure.
You're in
we don't-
cruise control. You're in cruise.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
feels
we
as though
just-
you're in cruise control, but that can be taken two ways. One, you got to make sure those levels don't drop, because if you drop those
Yeah.
levels slightly, you're in that sort of balancing act at the moment. You drop those levels slightly, you start losing games and start playing that way. You start going, hang about how do we approach this game? But if this is a gear that's still winning you games of football and keeping you unbeaten out of 10 games or 11 games in your case, think of the next gear. And
you
there's
say
clearly
this is
talent in that squad.
Would you say this is a team that feels quite vulnerable to a really well-structured press if one was to come and play one at Threat Park?
I think it's the opposite, to be honest. I think teams that are patient and sit off and then can attract us forward and create gaps, especially with Ogilvy now injured and Sparks at left back. If teams can target that our left-hand side, so I think if Exeter played us like this week, for example,
defensively in a back four, I think could be a problem.
So
as a wing back, I think you've got enough.
For example, I speak about Exeter a lot, but I think James Scott is not a great player in my opinion, and from what I've seen of him, but he pinned Shaughnessy really well. And then if you can get Dion Rankin up that right, up their right ahead of Sparks, I think we can be quite vulnerable there. And yeah, I think you've got to be patient with us, because what we want is teams to come out and be really aggressive and because we're so intricate in our play, we can just literally pull teams together and go bang, 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 and then we're beating your press. Whereas teams that sit off, I think Lincoln made us look quite average, to be honest, because they're stuck 10 men behind the ball, 11 men behind the ball, including the goalkeeper. Exeter stuck quite a few bodies behind the ball, and then we're really quick on the counter. Whereas teams that press us, I think Wigan want us to be quite aggressive, and we just pulled them apart, and a couple of other teams. But yeah.
So Jack, for Portsmouth to find the consistency required to give yourself it might be that the template that you've got at the moment gets you top two because of the standard of the league, but I think it's important that we hold you to maybe even higher standards to make sure that you try and find that consistency.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, well, just to add to that, what's required for Portsmouth to maybe find that extra gear, especially when it comes to unlocking those low blocks?
I don't think low blocks are much of an issue anymore. Well, I guess it's sort of.
I thought that was what you. Okay.
It's really difficult.
It sounds like you lot do a little bit of everything. You hate parts of everything, and you love parts of everything with this.
Yeah, definitely. I can try and answer that question. And before I forget about something else, I think we need to stop conceding so many goals. And it's not like we concede loads, but we concede one a game, and that needs to come down. And we need to stop conceding first, because this is not sustainable, what we're doing at the moment. As in, the constant comebacks, that's not sustainable. The style of play, to an extent, is sustainable, but the conceding first isn't. And I think so from last night, for example, we didn't have loads of threat in the first half. And I chatted, I did like a little live bit for the podcast at halftime with Andy. And I said, we just look quite dull at times and quite... we don't threaten the goal much at times. I think that's a real frustration because, passive, definitely. And almost like we get a bit too comfortable in the control. And then teams want to sit back anyway. So then if you dominate the ball, they're just going to sit back and you're kind of at a stalemate. We need to be a bit more incisive and a bit more direct at times, definitely. And we need to support Colby more, because although Colby's playing really well, he'll win everything in the air. There's no one near him. Like Tino, I love Tino Andrew, but he's not quite up to speed yet. His position yesterday was ropey, like getting in the way a lot. But it's also important to remember we've got a lot of injuries at the moment. Yeah, Yengi back soon but injured. Ogilvy, key player, injured. Pack possibly out for a couple of months. At worst case scenario, Pack's so important, and
Do you think, actually, Jack, with the Cassini-Yengi injury, that it might end up weirdly working in his favour, because he's kind of just come over from Australia, and that's a massive culture shock. Like, if you ask any 24-year-old in England to move over to Australia, they'd probably struggle. So, actually, I guess if you're looking at it optimistically, the injury gives him a bit of space to work out his surroundings and sort of find a bit of a life pattern, and then actually work on his, get to grips with things that way, and then come into a team that's already playing reasonably well and winning games and top of the league, and actually not have as much pressure as opposed to.
Definitely. I think with Cassini, and I'm not sure if this is on purpose or not, but Alex Robinson is Australian, and it appears that him and Alex have got a really good friendship, and you've seen him around Gunwharf going out for meals and stuff, which is lovely. I think there's just less pressure, because at the start of the season, Jack, I'm sure you talked about it on the podcast, but we didn't score much, and Then if you take out Cassini Yengi there, you go, oh, okay, where's the goals coming from? But now, centre backs are scoring for days, wingers are occasionally contributing, midfielders are scoring.
Paddy Lane's been great, hasn't he?
What a player. But whereas, you introduce him now, you go, okay, we got these goals already. You've scored 4 goals in 88 minutes of football or something ridiculous like that. I went to get up a data chart of him, and there was basically no data because he played no football but scored like 4 goals. You then go, you've got even more firepower. And yeah, as you say, it's a great moment for Young to come back in.
And what I love as well, just to add to what you're saying there, Jack, is that link-up play with Colby Bishop is going to be great, because I think Colby Bishop is actually made to get the best out of someone like Cassini Yengi, because he can play off the left as an inside forward, just going into those goal-scoring areas. I think I'm hoping he's going to be a bit of a League One Henri, no pressure to Cassini. But then you've got Colby Bishop kind of drifting in, dropping into those sort of pockets, the kind of number 10 position. So he's got that physicality to hold the ball up and bring it into. So I just think the synergy between those two, if they can kind of fine tune it, I think that could be really exciting. So I reckon that's going to be quite important to bring Pompey up a gear. Yeah,
definitely. I was chatting on the podcast, and I likened a striking partnership of Yengi and Bishop. I'm not sure if you said Mighty Ducks, but the Bash Bros just causing chaos, getting in people's faces.
The Mighty Ducks.
The Mighty Ducks is
a hockey film, Gab.
It's a 90s, 80s. There's a trilogy, and it gets worse as they go on, but 1 and 2 are superb. 3 is a bit dodgy.
It's a classic 90s American films.
It tells the story of a struggling bunch of young children who are mentored by an ex-NHL. I don't need to talk about this. My point being, I was chatting to someone, and I was saying how Colby Bishop, he won't score as many goals this year, I don't think, but he will play better because he's got better players around him. And I think it would be a bit reductive to say he's a stick-up target man who you can just fire. Honestly,
blasphemy.
I've compared him at times to, and this is in very lower level terms, it's played similarly to Harry Kane at times in that his passing
I do get the comparison.
So underrated. His passing is so underrated. He'd take the ball down on his chest, drop in, and then just spray a ball out to Paddy. That happened quite a few times last night. I just think, he's more than just goals. He just, there's not many things that Colby can't do. I mean, I didn't realise he had this passing range on him. He just ping balls around. It's great to watch. But you need to add Mighty Ducks to your watch list because it's very good.
Yeah, that's the one thing I'll take away from this conversation.
That's all. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Jack, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Hopefully Pompey can find that extra gear, but certainly a great position to be in at the moment. And it's been great to discuss it with you.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Cheers for having me on, boys.
And also, good luck at the Football Content Awards next month. Where can people get involved and vote for you?
Do I remember the website link? It is the Football Content Awards. .com/voting. I want to say it's linked
people
in my.
People can search.
Yeah, it's on my Twitter. I've not shut up about it.
What's your category?
It is best young content creator because I'm not 20 yet, so I've still got 2 months in me. 3 months. I can't do maths. 3 months in me.
Perfect. All right. Well, best of luck with that, and catch up with you later in the season, mate.
Yeah. Cheers, boys. Enjoy your night. Bye.
Yeah. Be sure to get voting for Jack as well, because he does some absolutely outstanding stuff. You can follow him on Twitter as well at Hancock Analysis. Delighted to introduce my next and final guest, which is Lee Rooney from the Brunton. I always forget this. Is it Bugle or Bugle?
Bugle.
It's Bugle.
Bugle.
Bugle. Of course, it Bugle.
Sorry, Lee. That's really
Bugle's a musical instrument. Sorry, that's very offensive. Listen, great to have you on. Great to have you on, Lee. Really appreciate your time. I think Jack Ward's got to shoot off now, so we'll let you go, Jack.
Thank you very much, guys. Great show. Really enjoyed it. Good conversation.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Take care.
Good evening, Jack.
Yeah, cheers, Jack. Lee, how are you feeling as a Carlisle fan at the moment in terms of your start to the season?
It's a kind of weird way of putting it, even though we're sitting are we just outside the relegation zone? No, I can't remember because we got that late equaliser last night. Not that downhearted. I think no team has battered us yet. I think Wigan got the closest first half. They were unbelievable, so good, but they only went in 1-0 up, and we managed to get a goal back second half by having a good go at them. Last night, first 20 minutes of Peterborough, unbelievable. It was like, wow, this is a real step up from what we faced all of last season. But actually, in all the other games, we've been competitive. We've we've matched teams, we've caused problems to some teams. We're not taking our chances as much, and we're probably lacking a little bit of quality in attack now compared to last season. But I genuinely think that with a few additions in January, which looks like we're going to get with the takeover news, potentially we should be okay. And the key thing for me is we've got to keep ourselves in touch in terms of not let ourselves get cut adrift, keep ourselves 1 or 2 points either side of the relegation zone at the very least. And then if January we can get these additions, I think we can really kick on. And that might sound a little bit negative, but we're being realistic. At the moment, we've probably got a bottom 6 budget.
When you talk about these additions, Lee, where exactly on the pitch are we referring to here? I think I know what you're going to say. But
I think I'd like to see some wingers brought in because Simo seems keen to play 4-3-3 occasionally this season. And since we've lost Amari Patrick,
it's kind of like Sean Maguire's probably the main winger now in this team, isn't it? Or Gibson, likewise.
Gibson very much.
Gibson is a winger in some ways, I suppose.
Yeah. And Amari Patrick played. That's not Amari Patrick. So Sean Maguire did play there last night. He did okay, but I'd rather see him down the middle because when he actually went down the middle, he caused a few problems, and Peterborough struggled to pick him up at times. We've got Danny Butterworth that we signed in the summer, and I can't work out what kind of player he is. I don't know if he's a winger. I don't know if he's an attacking midfielder. I don't know if he's a striker.
The best I've seen of him is off the striker.
Yeah.
We don't really play that way. So I feel like wingers is where I'd like to see us sign some players. Maybe a little bit of strength in midfield as well, possibly. It's been difficult because we were kind of hoping Jaden Harris might actually get a few chances this season because he looked good in pre-season, but he's not really been given it. Dylan McGeoch has just been a sick note so far. He's been injured all the time, and fortunately, similar with Taylor Charters. And again, we thought he might be able to step up this season, but he's picked up another hamstring injury that rules him out for 2 months. So, I think wingers and attack basically is where I'd like to see some strength in there.
You mentioned the midfield there, Lee, but you've got in there Callum Guy, who I think's refined his game brilliantly under Simo and very, very tenacious. You've got Owen Moxon, who's by all accounts stepped up to this league as well as we would have expected based on a star season last year. And you've got Alfie McCalmont, who 3 years ago was sort of being talked about as the heir to Calvin Phillips at Leeds. So, I mean, there is quality there in that midfield.
But I would argue, is there anything else beside that? What
that's where the problem is with Charters potentially could, but so far when he's come on in games, Charters, he's looked like he's not quite got to the pace of the game straight away, and he thinks he's got more time on the ball.
You're not doing the thing with Mellish anymore, are we? He's kind of more at the back now. Has he gone to that kind of box-to-box all-action role he had a couple of years ago?
He's occasionally been pushed into midfield a couple of times this season, but last night we played with him in a back four, and he actually did a really good, solid sitting job. He didn't push forward or anything. He was really reliable. You're right. In terms of beyond that, there's not a huge amount there. And there's an argument that Jordan Gibson's been our best midfielder this season. He's played in a midfield free for most of the games he's played in, and he's been our biggest threat. And actually, you say Moxon stepped up, and I suppose the stats would bear out, 2 goals, 2 assists. He's done all right so far. I don't think he's done as well as we all hoped.
Oh, really?
And maybe the distraction about his contract might be a slight issue there, I think. And the kind of hope is that can get sorted once the takeover is done. The issue is money. It's the release clause. That's the rumour. So essentially, him and his agent, who may well be Graham Kavanagh, basically want a release clause that the club are like, no, that's far too low. We can't agree to that. So that's where the discussion is. I'm kind of hoping once this takeover is sorted, maybe there'll be a bit more leeway there to sort something out. I don't know. But yeah, Moxon hasn't. It sounds stupid to say he hasn't made the step up because he has, but I think we expected him to take to it a bit better. But then generally, maybe we've just not been quite as strong.
I'd agree. On the back of the season he had, you instantly looked at this guy and said, this is the superstar in the team. This is the one who's going to grab League One by the horns, show that he's not only a top League Two man, he's a top League One man. And I think after a couple of weeks, I kind of thought it was going to be. And it's kind of gone a bit quieter since, which has kind of felt like it's correlated with this little downturn because there was kind of a bright start, I think. And really, since that win over Shrewsbury, you kind of feel like you've got into that stage of having to look over your shoulder again. Yeah,
a little bit. But we looked at these run of 4 games we're in at the moment, which started with the who did we play the other week? Derby game. So we played Derby at home, then Wickham away, Peterborough at home, and Bolton away this weekend. And you're kind of like, right, that's a bit of a stinker of a run there. At the moment, we've got 1 point out of a possible 9. We've got Bolton away at the weekend. We've got a massive away following going for that. So we're kind of
Is there an
hoping
element of fortune with that draw yesterday, with it being so late, or was it on general? Would you say it was probably the right outcome?
A little bit, but they were brilliant for the first 20 minutes. Peter. Their pace just terrified us. But once we got a bit of a grip of the game, it was fairly balanced. And actually, if you look back at it, we probably could have had 3 or 4 penalties. 3 of them looked like nailed on, and like the shirt pull one was outrageous. I don't know how the ref can't see that from a few yards away. And yeah, there's a little bit of luck with the goal coming late on like that, but then that's probably a good sign for us that we're actually battling and fighting to get these goals. And I'd rather be in that position than say Cheltenham, who struggling to hit a barn door really. So it's there's an element of luck in terms of that, but yeah.
Where do you think are the areas where Carlisle have been really strong so far this season? Then, Lee?
I think defensively we've actually been all right. I don't think any team scored more than 2 goals against us, and even in the Stevenage game when they did, we scored 2 ourselves. And yeah, I think we've been quite good there. I think Callum Guy's had a really good season actually as well. He's made the step up quite comfortably. He looks solid enough. Yeah, defensively, none of them have really looked out of place. I think it's fair to say.
Are you getting what you wanted from Jack Armour and Thin Back?
I think Back's taken a bit of time to get himself up to fitness, I think. And I think I'd like to see a bit more. But actually, last couple of games, he's looked much better. Jack Armour is one where... What you got with Jack Armour is last night was his 65th start in a row in the league and playoff games. So, and he's only, 21, I think, still?
It was always kind of funny, wasn't it? Because last year you had that injury problems and it felt like you were constantly changing your right back. And then it was just Armour constantly down the left all the time.
Yeah. I think he only missed in the league about 30 minutes, I think, in total. He got subbed in the last game, and that was just basically to give Jack Robinson a little bit of a run out, I think. And yeah, he's been fantastic.
Armour, sorry, I was just going to ask, do you prefer Jack Armour as a conventional left back, or do you prefer him as a left wing back where he maybe has more freedom?
As a left wing back, definitely. I think you get a bit more out in there. And I know for a fact that the last 2 managers, he played wing back under them and under Beach and Millen, and they would insist that you've got to hold back your defender first and do that. Simo's the exact opposite. He's like, I want you getting forward, I want you overlapping when you're playing as a wing back. And yeah, I think he could probably chip in with a few more goals. To be honest, he's got a bit of height about him and get him to the far post. He could cause problems, but generally a lot of our players always gone down the left because of Mellish, basically. So him and Armour have got a really good link down there. So yeah, I'm happy with him as a left wing back.
Do you think there's a way that you could maybe diversify the threat down the right that would allow Armour to maybe ghost into the back post at times?
I think it works well when Gibson plays, because Gibson, if he plays in the midfield free, he will tend to drift out wide to the right and support him back quite a bit, and he'll cause problems there. So that gives you a bit of an option, because he likes that sort of almost like side foot, sort of lofted ball over the top. Gibson to pick someone at the far post, and that's where Armour can cause problems.
But then does that work better when it's maybe a 3-5-2? So you've kind of got like 2 up top, and then you can kind of have Gibson coming in as almost like a wide forward. So in different phase of play, he can. He's got that freedom.
Essentially, kind of supported by Thin Back behind, for instance.
Yeah, but generally, when we've been strong and on the attacking games last season, that's generally what we did. Actually, it was more of a 3-5-2 than a 5-3-2. And the thing for us, the way we play it is with Mellish having that freedom to get forward when we play the free at the back. It becomes a back 4 sometimes as well, and then you have Callum Guy sometimes dropping into cover as well. So it's fairly flexible, and it was one of the big positives for us last season. We always said that we had that ability to switch from a 3-5-2 to a 4-3-3 quite easily by pushing Mellish into there and putting Gibson as one of the wide players. But we also had Patrick playing as a striker who could go out wide at that time. So we've lost a little bit of that flexibility this season in that sense, which probably hasn't helped things either.
Yeah, do you think you will go back to the back 3 then? Because it sounds like from what a lot of you described, actually that formation might suit this squad a bit more.
I think this weekend we will be playing with a back 3 against
Didn't Huntington
Bolton.
miss midweek?
He missed midweek.
Yeah.
I think Simo said that he always had it in his mind that he potentially was going to do that. He wanted to play 4 at the back in this one, and knowing Peter had quite a bit of pace, he was like, is it worth the risk of putting him in when you've got Mellish and Lavelle who can cover that quite well? So he went with that. I think with a game like the weekend game against Bolton, a bit more of experience there with a big away fall in there, I think Huntington will come back in for that one, definitely.
Yeah. How confident are you then, Lee, in terms of Carlisle's survival chances? Would you say you're more confident now than you were before that season, or as I'd imagine about the same?
Well, you might remember the start of the season. I was a bit bold and brash and confident, but we always
Oh
are.
yes,
And
I do
it's
remember
like,
that. Actually,
I went
yes.
12th, but there was that wasn't the basis that we might be getting a couple of players in, and they didn't come off annoyingly. So yeah, it's a difficult one to judge. I think with the takeover news, if that can get sorted in the next couple of weeks and get ourselves ready for January, 100% confident we can stay up, because I think we've got the right man in there. I think he knows what we need to bring in. We've been a bit unlucky with a few things as well. I mean, the Coyote thing is that's just rotten luck. To dislocate your shoulder in your first game, which was a trophy game that no one really cares about, and play on with it because you didn't know playing the next game with a dislocated shoulder. Well, it was back in, but he'd torn something in there basically. So that something like that. If we've had him fit, I think we'd have done better in some of these other
Yeah,
games.
I really like Josh Coyote. Actually, I think
It's where we've seen him at his best at Carlisle previously. He was great under Chris Beach.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoyed him in that front
Definitely.
line. It's fantastic.
And he played more as quite a wide forward often in that
Yeah,
line as well, not even as a central striker.
Yeah. I think he's good in the air, but he can also run directly at people, and he's so persistent as well. So yeah, hopefully you can get him back. But I do want to, before I let you go, Lee, talk about the ownership situation, because I feel like the takeover is huge for Carlisle, but it's funny the order that you've got about things, because the standard logic would be, until we have fundamental ownership change at this football club, we can't move forward, and no manager can do anything to change it. That's a lot of the time, that's the sort of conventional logic, and you've almost flipped that on its head. It's like you've got the manager in place to turn things around, and actually the ownership situation has kind of fallen into place off the back of that, by the looks of things. Yeah,
absolutely. And we're incredibly lucky to have someone like Paul Simpson, who has that close link to the club, has done it before with us, and he has an enormous amount of credit he can work with. That really helps as well. Like, there's not as much, there's always pressure there, of course there is, but there's not as much pressure on him. He can take things a little bit slower. He can get things sorted. I mean, he's probably 2 seasons ahead of schedule getting us up into League One, really. He said that himself. We've got up a bit too early, and as luck would have it, these people interested in taking over showed interest in February, and that's been working behind the scenes up until it was only found out in August. And one of the guys in our pod, Dan, he's the vice chair of the Supporters Trust, and he didn't tell me a single thing about it. And I was just like, how have you kept this quiet for so long?
It's like a spy, like you just completely poker face.
No, totally poker face. So like literally first when I saw the rumours and it all came out, he was denying it, and then when it came out, I was like, wow. So the great thing is, because Simo's given such a real positive lift to the fans, that's basically convinced the Piatics, the family who are interested in taking over, that wow, this is the place to come in. Apparently they've spent the last 6 years. Basically 6 years ago, they thought they wanted to get involved in professional sports, and they were like, where do we get involved? They were like, well, we love football. They say football, they don't say soccer, to be fair to them. They say, well, they looked at maybe the MLS or the USL, and they're like, well, no, we're watching the Premier League and the EFL every weekend on TV. Let's look there. And they realised League One and League Two was the place to look at, and apparently came up with a list of 5 potential options as clubs after doing all the research, and Carlisle were comfortably top of that list. So as luck would have it, we've been looking for new owners for a while, so it's really fallen into our lap in that sense. And the meeting they had with the fans was so incredibly positive, and they were talking about how much they're going to invest in the ground and building a new training ground as well, because that's the thing we needed so badly for so long. Anyone who's been in Brunton Park will see we train on a pitch that's behind the waterworks end, and it's okay, but it's right next to the river. It's a pitch, and when it's next to the river, when the river rises, it becomes a bog because the water table rises with it. So that needs sorting. They've said we're going to stay at Brunton Park, and the great thing is because they do a lot of community stuff out in Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida, where they're based. And say, well, we deal with a lot of stuff through hurricanes out there, and we're supporting that. So we know how to build buildings that are designed for when there's freak weather and that kind of thing.
Oh, wonderful.
So when we do work with Brunton Park, that's what we're going to do. We're going to design it so we can stay
Massive
there.
Massive flood walls all the way around the ground. Can't wait for this.
Well, yeah, and I think the idea is you
build
build
up on stilts, raise it up about 20 feet.
Well, near enough. You basically made the bottom of it a shell, don't you? And then you can just clean it out straight away and rebuild it pretty quickly. So, but yeah, and they've also said that Simo is going to get a step change budget in January, which is a big thing for us, because we have been fighting against the tide in terms of budgets in the last few years. So to actually potentially be able to go out there and look at some of our first and second choices instead of end up with the 4th and 5th is going to be really, really positive.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic, Lee, and I'm so glad you've said some of those things about how they're planning to invest in the club and
Yeah.
not just the team. Because although at the moment those are just words, and you do have to, sort of back it up with action. I also think that words from new owners are also incredibly significant a lot of the time as well, because the context of whether or not these people are willing to embrace the fabric of the football club and meet with supporters and really get themselves in there. I do think that makes such a difference to a fan base in terms of whether they've got the confidence in those new people to actually welcome them into the club for the next sort of chapter. Because I think when they're sort of silent and everything is secretive or sort of ambiguous, I think that's when fans begin to worry, especially perhaps with foreign ownership. Whereas I think the fact that they've shown that willingness to engage, I think, is a really positive thing.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, they've had to be quiet up until the point they had the meeting. They couldn't say anything because of, for legal reasons. They had to basically stay as they were. So Tom, who's the father, the leader of the family, he's obviously the one who owns the main company. He's been the one who set it all up. But his whole family's involved. So his wife's involved, and his daughter and his son and their partners are all going to be on the board, I think. And his daughter Jenny, she's been like going to like last couple of games, and she's putting stuff on Instagram stories, and they know so much. They've done their research so well, and they're coming out with stats and facts that even some of our fans are like, I didn't even know that. So like they're really positive. And Tom too, who's his son, he played football out in Florida as well, and he's a massive football fan, and he just loves it. So there's a real passion for it there. And the thing they've made very clear from the start is we're not going to load the club with debt. Everything's going to be equity. All their businesses are based on equity. There's no debt on them. So like, we're not going to load debt onto this club. We're going to get the debt that's currently there cleared. And it just, there's a little bit of, you want to pinch yourself and say, all right, well, what's the catch here? What's the thinking? What's the secret? Because we've been waiting for this for so long, and we've had a few false dawns, and ones where, quite frankly, I'm glad they never happened now, because if they had, it would have been so much worse than what potentially we're going to get. So they haven't made any stupid promises either. They've not said we're going to be in the Championship in 5 years or Premier League in 10 years. They've just said we want to make this club better. And they said, look, if when we invest the money out of it, we make a £1 profit, we'll be happy. But that £1 will go straight back into the club. That's what they said. So from what I've heard from people who've spoke to them directly, they say like the most genuine people you could like to meet. So really hopeful, but like I said, the proof's in the pudding and all that, isn't it? So.
Of course, yeah. But no, I'm so excited for you, Lee, because the number of conversations I've had with Carlisle United fans about some of the issues at the club, and there's gratitude for some of the people at the club. Now, don't get me wrong, people have saved the club, or Nigel Clibbins has done a great job as well. But I think it's so exciting that the club's got this this new era in terms of ownership, and I think that's a really exciting thing. So hopefully there's good times ahead for the Cumbrians under Paul Simpson. Great to have you on the show, Lee. Love your stuff on Brunton Bugle. Thanks for coming on. Thanks to my co-host Ed Walker as well. Brilliant insight on League One and League Two. Thanks to you for watching at home, and thanks to all our guests. This has been the EFL Debate League One podcast, and we'll see you again next week.
Big up the Buggles.